I spent 3 hours preparing the perfect Christmas Eve dinner. The pot roast, my specialty, simmered with carrots and potatoes, filling the house with the aroma of rosemary and thyme. The table was set with the good china, the set Edward and I had received for our wedding 53 years ago. 3 crystal glasses sparkled in the soft glow of candlelight. A small pine tree twinkled in the corner, adorned with ornaments collected over decades of Christmases past. Everything was perfect, except that I had set the table for 4, and my 3 children would be arriving without my beloved granddaughter Emily, currently somewhere in Europe, on the adventure we had secretly planned together. At precisely 6:30 p.m., the doorbell rang. I smoothed my best holiday sweater, dark green with subtle silver threading, and opened the door with a practiced smile. "Merry Christmas," I said, stepping back to allow them entry. Robert entered first, my oldest. At 53, his once dark hair was now streaked with gray, his face etched with lines I didn't recognize. Susan followed, still in her doctor's coat, as if she couldn't spare the time to change for family dinner. David, my youngest, came last, looking uncomfortable and avoiding my eyes. No one carried gifts, no one returned my greeting. "Something smells good, Mom," David offered weakly. "Pot roast," I replied, the smile still fixed on my face though it felt increasingly brittle. "Your father's favorite. I thought we could honor the tradition." Robert cleared his throat. "Mom, we need to talk before dinner." The formality in his tone sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the December air seeping through the open door. "Of course," I said, gesturing toward the living room. "Would anyone like a drink first?" "This isn't a social call, Mother," Susan said, her doctor voice firmly in place, the one she used with difficult patience. I was suddenly acutely aware of being categorized as a problem to be solved. We settled in the living room, the 3 of them perched on the edge of my sofa like birds ready to take flight. I took my usual armchair, the one with the best view of the backyard garden, now dormant under a thin layer of snow. "We've made a decision," Robert began, assuming his boardroom posture. "After careful consideration of your health situation." "My health situation?" I interrupted. "You mean the mild stroke I had 6 months ago, from which I've fully recovered?" Susan shook her head. "Not fully, Mom. You have mobility issues, cognitive concerns that you may not be fully aware of." "I'm perfectly aware of my faculties, Susan," I said, my voice sharper than intended. "I still drive. I still manage my own finances. I submitted and edited an entire manuscript this year." "That's part of the problem," Robert interjected. "These hobbies are distracting you from focusing on your health. You're not as young as you think, Mom." At 78, I was acutely aware of my age. Every morning, my joints reminded me. Every night, the silence of an empty house reminded me. But I had adapted, persevered, found purpose again in the pages of the novel I'd secretly worked on for 2 decades. "We've found a place for you," David finally spoke, his voice soft with what sounded like genuine concern. "Sunrise Valley. It's really nice, Mom. Professional care, activities, people your own age." The words hung in the air like poisonous gas. I struggled to breathe. "You want to put me in a nursing home? On Christmas Eve?" My voice sounded distant to my own ears. Robert had the decency to look uncomfortable. The timing isn't ideal, but they had an opening, and we all happened to be in town. "How convenient for you," I said, ice forming around each syllable. "It's for your own good," Susan insisted. "After that fall last month, I tripped on a loose rug," I countered, "which I've since removed." "Mom," David leaned forward, his eyes pleading. "We're worried. You're alone here. What if something happens and no one is around to help?" I wanted to remind him that if they visited more than twice a year, perhaps I wouldn't be so alone. I wanted to tell Susan that if she called more than once a month, maybe she would know that I'd joined a water aerobics class and a book club. I wanted to ask Robert if this sudden concern had anything to do with the developer who'd been leaving offers in my mailbox to buy my property. Instead, I looked at their faces, these adults who had once been the center of my universe, and saw the decision was already made. My bags were probably already packed. Robert had a key, after all. "May I at least finish preparing Christmas dinner?" I asked quietly. Robert checked his watch. "We're expected at sunrise by 8. They're holding the room for you." I stood carefully, using the cane I resented but needed since the stroke. "I see. Then I suppose I should get my coat." As I moved toward the hall closet, my eyes caught the corner of an envelope peeking out from beneath a book on my writing desk. The letter from the Wellington Literary Prize Committee informing me that my historical novel, published under a pseudonym, had won not only critical acclaim, but a $10 million prize. The announcement would air nationally on Christmas morning. I had planned to share my secret success over Christmas dinner, to surprise my children with the news that their mother, old, fragile Margaret Wilson, had achieved her lifelong dream. Now, as I buttoned my coat with trembling fingers, I decided to keep that secret a little longer. "I'm ready," I announced, leaving the envelope where it lay. The ride to Sunrise Valley was a study in silence. I sat in the back seat of Robert's luxury sedan, watching Christmas decorations blur past the window, each twinkling light another step away from the home I'd thought I would die in someday. David sat beside me, occasionally patting my hand in what I suppose he thought was reassurance. Susan followed in her own car, probably to ensure a quick escape after the deed was done. Robert parked beneath a portico, adorned with a half-hearted garland. Sunrise Valley was etched in elegant script above the entrance, the letters illuminated by soft lighting designed to suggest warmth and welcome. The effect was undermined by the institutional sterility that no amount of holiday decoration could disguise. A young woman with a clipboard greeted us at the reception desk. Her name tag read Kayla, and her smile seemed genuine, if practiced. "Mrs. Wilson, we're so pleased to welcome you to Sunrise Valley, especially on Christmas Eve. We have a lovely celebration happening in the community room, if you'd like to join after we get you settled." I nodded politely, words momentarily beyond my capacity. My children, however, had plenty to say. "She needs a ground floor room," Susan instructed. "Her mobility is compromised, and stairs would be a fall risk. Also, she's on several medications that should be monitored. I've brought her complete medical file." "Mom likes her privacy," David added, as if trying to mitigate his sister's clinical assessment. "Is there a room with a nice view, maybe?" Robert remained silent, handling the financial paperwork with efficient detachment. I stood slightly apart from this transaction, my life being arranged without my input. Through a set of double doors, I could see elderly residents gathered around a television, some wearing Santa hats, others dozing in wheelchairs. Was this to be my new tribe? These strangers united only by the fact that their families, like mine, had decided they were too inconvenient to keep at home. Kayla led us down a beige hallway to room 117. "One of our nicest singles," she chirped, unlocking the door with a key card she then handed to me. "Mrs. Wilson, this is yours. Don't lose it now." Her tone, slightly too loud and painfully patronizing, made me wince. I'd been a university professor for 30 years. I'd lectured halls of hundreds, published academic papers, and now, secretly, written a novel worthy of the Wellington Prize. Yet here I was, being spoken to like a slightly dim child. The room was clean, impersonal, and depressing. A single bed with a bland blue coverlet, a dresser, a television mounted on the wall, a small bathroom with safety rails that reminded me of my supposedly precarious mortality. Someone had placed a small poinsettia on the windowsill, the only acknowledgement that tonight families across the country were gathering in love and celebration while I was being discarded like outdated furniture. Robert placed my hastily packed suitcases by the dresser. "The staff will help you unpack tomorrow," he said, not meeting my eyes. Susan was examining the bathroom. "The shower setup is good," she called out. "Much safer than your old clawfoot tub at home." David sat beside me on the bed, the mattress sagging beneath our combined weight. "It's just until you're stronger, Mom," he said quietly. "We want you to be safe." I looked at my youngest, the sensitive boy who'd become a distracted man. "Is that what you tell yourselves? That this is about my safety?" He flinched, and I immediately regretted my sharpness. This wasn't entirely David's doing. Robert had always been the ringleader, Susan his reliable second. David just followed, as he had since childhood. "We should let you get settled," Robert announced, checking his watch again, a nervous habit when he felt uncomfortable. "They're serving dinner in the dining room soon." The goodbyes were mercifully brief. Awkward hugs, promises to visit soon, assurances that I'd come to love it here. Then they were gone, leaving behind the lingering scent of Susan's expensive perfume and the hollow echo of the closing door. I sat motionless on the edge of the bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of my new reality. Distant televisions, a medication cart squeaking down the hall, someone coughing in a nearby room. My carefully prepared pot roast would be cooling on the stove in my empty house. The good china would remain unused. The carefully wrapped gifts for my children would sit beneath the tree, unopened. Tears pressed hot behind my eyelids, but I refused to release them. I hadn't cried when Edward died 5 years ago, standing strong for my children. I hadn't cried when the doctor confirmed the stroke, focusing instead on recovery. I wouldn't cry now, abandoned on Christmas Eve. Instead, I methodically unpacked one suitcase, arranging toiletries in the small bathroom, placing the framed photo of Emily on the nightstand, hanging my robe on the back of the door. Small acts of ordinary life that somehow made this sterile room minutely more mine. When a staff member knocked, announcing dinner was being served, I declined politely. Food was beyond me tonight. Instead, I changed into my nightgown, took my evening medications, and slipped beneath unfamiliar sheets. Tomorrow was Christmas. Tomorrow, the nation would learn about Margaret Wilson, the septuagenarian first-time novelist who'd captured the Wellington Prize. Tomorrow, my children would turn on their televisions and discover what they had thrown away. The thought brought me no joy, only a hollow ache where family love should have been. As sleep finally claimed me, I wondered if Emily, wandering through European Christmas markets as we'd planned during our secret meetings, would somehow see the broadcast and understand why her grandmother wasn't answering the phone this Christmas. I woke disoriented, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar ceiling and the antiseptic smell that was decidedly not home. The events of Christmas Eve crashed back with cruel clarity. My children, the nursing home, abandonment disguised as concern. The bedside clock read 7:15 a.m., Christmas morning. For a moment, I allowed myself to remember other Christmas mornings. Robert and Susan racing downstairs in footy pajamas, David toddling behind, Edward making his famous pancakes. Later, Emily's delighted gasps at the carefully chosen books I'd wrapped for her each year. A gentle knock interrupted my reminiscence. "Good morning, Mrs. Wilson. Merry Christmas." A cheerful aide I hadn't met yesterday entered with a tray. "I'm Denise. Thought you might like breakfast in your room, being your first morning and all." Her kindness, unexpected and undeserved, brought a lump to my throat. "Thank you, Denise. That's very thoughtful. Just doing my job, hun." She set the tray on a rolling table and positioned it over my lap. "We've got a nice Christmas program starting at 9 in the community room. Carols, little gifts, even a Santa for those with visiting grandkids." She glanced around the empty room. "Your family coming by today?" I focused on buttering my toast. I wouldn't expect so. Denise's expression softened with understanding that made me want to crawl under the covers. "Well, sometimes the holidays are complicated, but you won't be alone. We're all family here at Sunrise." The platitude, though well-meaning, scraped against my raw emotions. Family didn't abandon you on Christmas Eve. Family didn't sign papers transferring responsibility for your care to strangers. Family didn't. "Would you like the television on while you eat?" Denise asked, interrupting my bitter thoughts. "The Christmas parade is starting soon." "Yes, thank you," I replied, grateful for the distraction. She turned on the modest wall-mounted screen, found the parade broadcast, and adjusted the volume. "Just press your call button if you need anything, Mrs. Wilson. I'll come back for your tray in a bit." After she left, I nibbled half-heartedly at breakfast while watching dancers and floats process down a street somewhere warm and sunny. The forced cheer of the commentators grated on my nerves, but the alternative was silence and my own thoughts. A worse prospect. At 8:30 a.m., the parade coverage was interrupted by a special announcement. My heart began to race. "We're cutting away briefly for an exclusive interview," the host explained. Literature lovers have been speculating for weeks about the mysterious winner of this year's Wellington Prize. The prestigious award carries not only critical acclaim, but a $10 million endowment, one of the largest in literary awards. This year's recipient has finally been revealed, and the story is remarkable. The screen cut to footage recorded last week. Me, sitting in my living room, wearing my best blue dress, looking far more composed than I felt. The network had been kind enough to send a makeup artist who had somehow minimized my wrinkles and age spots, giving me a dignified glow that belied my 78 years. Margaret Wilson, the voiceover continued. A retired literature professor spent 20 years secretly writing her debut novel, Echoes of Silence, the sweeping historical epic that has captured readers' imaginations and critics' praise worldwide. The camera zoomed in on my face as I answered the interviewer's question about my writing process. I wrote in the early mornings, before dawn, my recorded self explained. After my husband died, I found those quiet hours were when I could hear my characters most clearly. For 20 years, it was my secret garden, a world only I could enter. Sharing it now feels both terrifying and exhilarating. And the $10 million prize? The interviewer prompted. Any plans for that unexpected windfall? My on-screen smile was gentle. I plan to establish a literacy foundation for seniors. Reading and writing saved me from despair after widowhood. I want others to discover that same lifeline. A pause, then. And of course, I've set aside portions for my family, especially my granddaughter Emily, who encouraged me to submit the manuscript when I'd nearly lost my nerve. I turned off the television, my hands trembling slightly. By now, my children would be seeing this broadcast. Robert, who habitually watched morning news with his coffee. Susan, who kept a television in her kitchen for background noise while preparing breakfast for her family. David, who might still be sleeping after Christmas Eve, but would certainly hear from the others. Their mother, old, frail, cognitively compromised according to Susan's assessment, was now a celebrated author and millionaire. The mother they had discarded at a nursing home like unwanted furniture was suddenly newsworthy, valuable, worth keeping around perhaps. My bitter thoughts were interrupted by a commotion in the hallway. Raised voices, hurried footsteps. "Ma'am, visiting hours don't start until 10. I'm her son. This is an emergency. Sir, please, you need to sign in." My door burst open. Robert stood there, still wearing what appeared to be pajama bottoms under his hastily donned coat, hair uncombed, eyes wild. "Mom," he said, breathing hard, "we saw the interview. Why didn't you tell us? We need to get you home right away." Behind him, a flustered nurse was calling for security. Over his shoulder, I could see Susan rushing down the hallway, still in her robe, David trailing behind her like a confused puppy. In that moment, looking at my son's face transformed by the knowledge of my newfound wealth, something crystallized within me, a clarity as sharp as broken glass. I straightened my spine and met his gaze directly. "Visiting hours start at 10, I said calmly. "Please respect the rules of my new home, the one you so carefully selected for my well-being just last night." Robert's face cycled through emotions with comical rapidity, shock, confusion, calculation, and finally a strained approximation of contrition. "Mom, there's been a terrible misunderstanding," he said, lowering his voice as a security guard appeared behind him. "We were worried about you being alone, but obviously we didn't have all the information. Mrs. Wilson, are these people bothering you?" The security guard, a solidly built man with kind eyes, directed his question to me, not my children, a small courtesy that didn't escape my notice. "These are my children," I explained, smoothing the blanket across my lap, who seemed to have forgotten the visiting hours they were clearly informed of last night. Susan pushed past Robert, her doctor's authority evident in her posture. "We're her immediate family. Surely that grants some flexibility with visiting hours, especially on Christmas." The guard remained unmoved. "Policy is policy, ma'am. If you'd like to wait in the visitor's lounge until 10 o'clock, you're welcome to do so." "This is ridiculous," Susan huffed. "Mother, tell them you want to see us." All three of my children stared at me expectantly, their expressions a blend of impatience and newly discovered respect. Just yesterday, I had been an inconvenient burden. Today, with 10 million reasons to reconsider, I was suddenly worthy of their undivided attention. "I'll see you at 10, I said quietly. "I need to finish my breakfast and get dressed. The community room would be an appropriate place to meet." David, always the most sensitive to undercurrents, placed a restraining hand on Robert's arm as he began to protest. "That's fair, Mom. We'll wait. Take your time." After they retreated, Susan with obvious reluctance, Denise returned to collect my breakfast tray. "Well, well," she said, eyebrows raised. "Seems like you're the celebrity of Sunrise Valley today. The nurses' station is buzzing about your interview." "News travels fast," I murmured, "and your family seems mighty eager to celebrate with you this morning." Her tone was neutral, but her eyes held understanding. "Would you like help getting dressed for your visitors?" I nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the morning's events. As Denise helped me select a sweater and slacks from my hastily packed suitcase, I found myself explaining the situation. My secret writing career, the prize, my children's Christmas Eve ambush. $10 million, Denise whispered, shaking her head as she helped me with my stockings. And they didn't know when they brought you here? No, I confirmed. I'd planned to tell them over Christmas dinner, the dinner I spent hours preparing and never got to serve. Denise's expression hardened. Well, isn't that something? And now they're breaking down the door at 8 in the morning. She patted my shoulder. You take all the time you need, Mrs. Wilson. I'll tell them you'll be ready when you're ready. By 9:30, I was dressed, my hair arranged as neatly as possible, my lips touched with the pale pink lipstick I'd worn for special occasions since my teaching days. I made my way slowly to the community room, leaning more heavily on my cane than usual, my body feeling the emotional strain of the past 24 hours. The room was festively decorated with a large Christmas tree, garlands, and tables set with red cloths and centerpieces. A few residents were already gathered, some in wheelchairs, others seated in plush chairs, most watching a holiday movie on the large television. In a corner, my 3 children sat rigidly, out of place among the elderly residents and harried staff. Robert spotted me first, rising immediately and crossing the room with his business smile firmly in place. "Mom, you look wonderful," he said, bending to kiss my cheek. "Merry Christmas." Susan and David followed, offering their own greetings with newfound warmth. I accepted their kisses and allowed David to help me into a comfortable chair, positioning myself strategically so they were forced to sit facing me, the Christmas tree twinkling accusingly behind them. "I suppose congratulations are in order," Susan began, her voice pitched for privacy despite the open room. "Your book, The Prize. It's incredible, Mom." "Why keep it a secret? Would you have believed me?" I asked simply. "A 78-year-old woman writing a historical novel worthy of the Wellington Prize? You barely believe I can live independently, despite all evidence to the contrary." My directness created an uncomfortable silence. David broke it first. "We were wrong," he said quietly, "about bringing you here. It was a mistake, and we're sorry." Robert nodded vigorously. "Absolutely. A terrible error in judgment. We should take you home immediately." I studied my oldest son, noting the calculation behind his contrition. "And if there had been no prize money? If I were just your aging mother who wrote a book nobody read? Would it still have been a mistake?" Robert shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, that's not fair. We were concerned about your health." "My health hasn't changed since yesterday," I interrupted. "Only my bank account has." Another silence fell, heavier than the first. Around us, Christmas music played softly, a cruel counterpoint to our fractured family tableau. An elderly man in a wheelchair was helped to a nearby table by an aide, his trembling hands clutching a brightly wrapped package. Someone, at least, had family who remembered him with a gift. "The money isn't important," Susan tried, her doctor's composure cracking slightly. "We just want you home, where you belong." "Do I belong there?" I asked, genuine curiosity in my voice. "Last night you were quite convinced I belonged here." The strained silence that followed my question was broken by a deep voice behind me. "Excuse me, are you Margaret Wilson? The Margaret Wilson?" I turned to find an elderly gentleman standing there, tall despite a slight stoop, with silver hair and intelligent blue eyes behind wire-framed glasses. He wore a cardigan over a crisp button-down shirt, dressed for Christmas, not like a man who'd been discarded. "I am," I replied cautiously. His face lit up with genuine excitement. "I thought so. I saw your interview this morning. I'm Daniel Morris. I was senior fiction editor at Harper & Row before retirement." He extended a hand, which I took. His grip was warm and firm. "Your novel is extraordinary. The committee made the right choice." "You've read it?" I couldn't hide my surprise. "Twice," he confirmed. "I requested an advance copy when the shortlist was announced. The way you handled the immigrant experience during the labor movement, masterful, reminded me of Doctorow at his best, but with a distinctly feminine perspective. For the first time since arriving at Sunrise Valley, I felt a spark of genuine pleasure. Not the bitter satisfaction of seeing my children squirm, but the pure joy of discussing my work with someone who truly understood it. "Mr. Morris was just placed with us last week," explained Denise, who had appeared with a tray of coffee. He specifically requested Sunrise Valley because of our literary programs. We have quite the book club, Mrs. Wilson. My children watched this exchange with poorly concealed impatience. Robert cleared his throat loudly. Mom, we should really discuss getting you home. Today, preferably. I'm sure they'll need your room for another patient. Daniel raised an elegant eyebrow. Leaving so soon? That would be a tremendous loss for our book club. He turned to me with a conspiratorial smile. I was hoping you might consider leading a discussion of your novel once the residents have had a chance to read it. We have several former academics here who would be thrilled. Before I could respond, Susan interjected. Our mother won't be staying. There's been a misunderstanding. She doesn't require this level of care. Daniel's expression remained pleasant, but something knowing flickered in his eyes. I see. Christmas Eve admission, Christmas Day discharge. Quite the efficient medical recovery. The barb, delivered with impeccable politeness, landed precisely. Susan flushed. David studied his shoes, and Robert's jaw tightened. Mr. Morris, I said, making a split-second decision. I'd be honored to lead that book discussion. Perhaps in the new year? Mother, Susan hissed. What are you saying? I turned to my children, who were staring at me with varying degrees of disbelief. I'm saying that I'm not leaving today. That's absurd, Robert sputtered. This place is for people who need assistance. You've just proven you're completely capable. Yesterday you insisted I wasn't, I reminded him. Which is it, Robert? David leaned forward. Mom, we made a mistake. We're trying to fix it. Some mistakes can't be fixed with a simple apology, I said, softening my tone for my youngest. Some require more meaningful amends. If this is about the money, Robert began, his business negotiation voice taking over. We understand you're upset, but punishing yourself by staying in this facility isn't the answer. Daniel, who had been observing our exchange with quiet interest, spoke up. If you'll excuse my intrusion, Mrs. Wilson isn't punishing herself by staying here. Sunrise Valley has quite a respectable community. Many residents choose to be here despite having other options. Exactly, I agreed, warming to Daniel's support. And as it happens, I'd like some time to consider my options. The prize money opens possibilities I hadn't previously considered. A bell chimed softly, signaling the start of the Christmas program. Around us, residents were being wheeled or escorted to seats facing a small stage area where a staff member dressed as Santa Claus was arranging gift bags. Perhaps we should continue this discussion privately, Susan suggested, eyeing the gathering crowd with professional distaste. Perhaps we should continue it another day, I countered. It's Christmas after all, and I'd like to participate in the festivities here. With strangers? Robert couldn't keep the incredulity from his voice. With my new neighbors, I corrected him. Besides, I'm expecting an important call today. From whom? Susan asked suspiciously. From Emily, I said. Once she sees the broadcast, she'll want to congratulate her grandmother. The mention of Emily, the only family member who truly knew me, silenced them momentarily. Emily, who had spent countless hours listening to me read early drafts. Emily, who had researched literary agents and submission guidelines. Emily, who had believed in me when no one else even knew there was something to believe in. Emily knew about the book? David asked, hurt creeping into his voice. All this time? Emily asked. I said simply, about my life, my interests, my dreams. She visited regularly, not just on obligatory holidays. She earned my confidence. My words struck home. All three of my children had the grace to look ashamed, though Robert quickly masked it with pragmatism. At least let us take you to lunch, he offered. Somewhere nicer than the cafeteria here. We can discuss everything then. I considered his offer, sensing the desperation beneath it. They wanted me away from Sunrise Valley, away from witnesses to their Christmas Eve abandonment. They wanted private access to discuss my newfound wealth and how it might benefit them. I've already made lunch plans, I said, nodding toward Daniel, who smiled in immediate understanding. But you're welcome to visit tomorrow, during regular visiting hours, of course. My children departed shortly after, leaving behind 3 hastily purchased gift bags from the hospital gift shop, their attempt at salvaging their image in front of the staff and residents who had witnessed our exchange. I placed the unopened bags in my room before joining the Christmas celebration, where Daniel saved me a seat beside him. Your family seems quite concerned about your welfare, he observed dryly, as we watched a local children's choir perform carols, particularly since this morning's broadcast. Remarkable timing, isn't it? I replied, accepting a cup of punch from a volunteer. Daniel's eyes twinkled with understanding. Positively miraculous, like Scrooge on Christmas morning, except with 3 ghosts of Christmas present instead of past, present, and future. His literary reference made me laugh, a genuine laugh, the first since arriving at Sunrise Valley. You really were an editor, weren't you? 43 years at Harper & Row, then HarperCollins after the merger, he confirmed. Retired 8 years ago when reading manuscripts began requiring 3 different pairs of glasses. Now I only read for pleasure. And you really read my book? Twice, he repeated. The first time as a reader, swept away by the narrative. The second time as an editor, marveling at the technical craftsmanship. You must have been an extraordinary professor, Margaret. Maggie, I corrected him, surprising myself. No one had called me Maggie since Edward died. My friends call me Maggie. Maggie, then. He smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening pleasantly. And you must call me Daniel. The Christmas program continued with gift distribution. Small packages containing hand lotion, slipper socks, and chocolates. A staff member dressed as an elf took photographs of residents with Santa, which struck me as both infantilizing and oddly touching. These elderly men and women, many apparently forgotten by their families on Christmas, still found joy in simple festivities. My phone rang just as lunch was being served in the dining hall. Emily's name flashed on the screen. "Grandma!" she exclaimed when I answered. "I just saw your interview. Why didn't you tell me they were airing it today? I'm in a cafe in Barcelona using their Wi-Fi, and suddenly your face appears on my news feed." I screamed so loudly the waiter thought I was being attacked. Her enthusiasm warmed me more than any central heating could. "I wanted it to be a surprise," I explained, moving to a quiet corner for privacy. "Are you enjoying Barcelona?" "Yes, but forget Barcelona. You're famous and rich. $10 million, Grandma. We need to celebrate when I get back next week." "I'd like that," I said, realizing I meant it deeply. "I have much to tell you." "Like what? Is there more news? Don't tell me you're working on another book already." I hesitated, unsure how to explain what had transpired. Emily adored her father and aunt and uncle, despite their flaws. The knowledge of their betrayal would hurt her. "It's complicated," I said finally. "Better discussed in person. How's the weather in Barcelona?" She accepted the deflection, launching into a detailed description of her travels, her voice bubbling with the enthusiasm of youth. I listened, treasuring her excitement, until she suddenly asked, "Wait, where are you? That doesn't sound like home in the background." Before I could formulate a gentle explanation, a loudspeaker announcement blared, "Medication distribution will begin in 15 minutes. Please return to the dining hall if you require lunchtime medications." "Grandma," Emily's voice sharpened with concern. "Where are you?" "Sunrise Valley," I admitted. "It's a retirement community. A nursing home. Since when? What happened?" The alarm in her voice made me regret my honesty. "It's a recent development. Your parents and uncles thought I needed more support. On Christmas? They moved you on Christmas?" Her indignation was palpable, even across an ocean. "Put Dad on the phone right now." "He's not here, sweetheart." "None of them are." A pregnant pause followed. "They dumped you in a nursing home on Christmas Eve and then didn't even visit on Christmas Day? After everything you've done for them?" "They visited briefly this morning," I said, trying to soften the blow. After seeing the broadcast, Emily's sharp intake of breath told me she understood immediately. "Those calculating, materialistic—" She cut herself off. "I'm coming home. Today. I'll change my flight." "Don't you dare," I said firmly. "You've planned this trip for a year. I'm perfectly fine." "You're in a nursing home, Grandma." "A rather pleasant one, as it turns out," I countered. "I've made a friend already, a retired book editor who's read my novel twice. But your house will still be there when you return next week as planned," I finished for her. "We'll sort everything out then. I promise." After further reassurances, Emily reluctantly agreed not to cut her trip short, though she insisted on calling daily to check on me. When we hung up, I found Daniel waiting patiently at a respectful distance. "Everything all right?" he asked as I rejoined him. "My granddaughter is concerned," I explained. "She doesn't understand why I'm here." "And why are you here, Maggie?" he asked gently. "I noticed your children didn't seem to have a clear answer." We walked slowly toward the dining hall, my cane tapping a gentle rhythm on the tiled floor. "I'm here because my children decided, without consulting me, that I was too frail to live independently," I said, the bitterness creeping back into my voice. They arrived for Christmas dinner and instead took me to a nursing home. Daniel's expression darkened. Before they knew about your literary prize, before they knew I was worth $10 million, I confirmed. Amazing how one's apparent health improves with financial value. As we settled at a small table for lunch, a holiday meal of turkey and cranberry sauce that paled in comparison to my abandoned pot roast, Daniel studied me thoughtfully. What will you do now? Go home with your tail between your legs because they've reconsidered your disposability? His bluntness was refreshing after a lifetime of polite obfuscation. No, I said firmly. I won't. Good, he nodded approvingly. Because you have options, Maggie. More than they realize. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a blur of activity. My children called daily, each conversation a delicate dance of guilt, reconciliation attempts, and thinly veiled inquiries about my financial plans. I kept these discussions brief and non-committal. I'm still adjusting, I told Robert when he pressed about bringing me home for New Year's Eve. The staff here is very attentive. It's a nursing home, Mom, he countered with poorly disguised exasperation. Not a 5-star resort. I'm aware of what it is, I replied evenly. You made that abundantly clear on Christmas Eve. These exchanges always ended the same way, with my children frustrated by my newfound resilience and me quietly replacing the receiver with a mixture of sadness and resolve. Meanwhile, word of my literary achievement spread through Sunrise Valley. Residents I'd never met stopped me in hallways to offer congratulations. The activities director asked if I would consider starting a writing workshop. The administrator himself visited my room, suddenly concerned that my accommodations were satisfactory. We're so honored to have someone of your stature with us, Mrs. Wilson, he gushed, eyeing the modest room as if seeing it through my presumably more discerning eyes. If there's anything we can do to make your stay more comfortable, I smiled politely. Perhaps some bookshelves? I've asked my granddaughter to bring some of my library when she returns. Bookshelves, of course. I'll have maintenance install them immediately. This sudden deference was both amusing and disheartening. How quickly respect materialized when attached to success and wealth. The brightest spot in this strange new chapter was my growing friendship with Daniel. Unlike everyone else, his attitude toward me hadn't changed with the news of my prize. He'd already respected me, for my writing, for my intellect, before knowing of my financial worth. We fell into an easy routine, taking meals together, attending the uninspired activities with good humor, and spending hours in conversation about books, publishing, and the life experiences that had shaped us. I learned about his marriage of 40 years to a brilliant mathematician who had succumbed to Alzheimer's 3 years earlier. He heard about my decades with Edward, our world travels, and the subtle disappointments of watching my children grow into adults I sometimes barely recognized. Parenthood is the great gamble, Daniel reflected as we sat in the small sunroom, watching snow fall softly outside. You pour everything into these little beings, hoping they'll absorb your values, your worldview. Then they go and develop their own ideas entirely. Mine certainly did, I agreed. Robert was always materialistic, but I never imagined he'd value money over family to this extent. And Susan, she was such a compassionate child. Now she diagnoses emotions as if they're disorders to be managed with proper treatment. And David? I sighed. David always followed the path of least resistance. If Robert and Susan jumped off a cliff, he'd ask about the water depth below. Daniel finished with a chuckle. On New Year's Eve, Sunrise Valley organized a modest celebration. Sparkling cider, paper hats, and a television tuned to the Times Square countdown. Most residents were asleep well before midnight, but Daniel and I remained in the community room, watching the glittering ball descend amid the crowd of revelers. What will your resolution be? He asked, as we sipped our cider from plastic champagne flutes. I considered the question seriously. To live deliberately, I said finally. No more going along to keep the peace. No more sacrificing my needs for people who don't appreciate the sacrifice. A worthy resolution, he approved. Though I suspect you were already heading in that direction when your novel won. Perhaps, I acknowledged. The prize gave me confidence, but the abandonment gave me clarity. What about you? Any resolutions? Daniel's eyes, bright with intelligence and something warmer, held mine. To recognize good fortune when it appears, even in unlikely places. As the countdown reached 0 and 2023 arrived with manufactured fanfare on the television screen, Daniel raised his plastic glass to mine. "To new beginnings, Maggie." "To new beginnings," I echoed, feeling a flutter of something I hadn't experienced in years. Possibility. Emily returned on January 2nd, bursting into my room at Sunrise Valley like a whirlwind of righteous indignation. She embraced me fiercely before pulling back to examine me, as if expecting to find visible damage from my children's betrayal. "You look good, Grandma," she said, sounding almost disappointed not to find me in worse condition to fuel her anger. "But you shouldn't be here." "It's not so bad," I assured her, gesturing for her to sit. "I've made friends. Dad says you refuse to come home. Is that true?" I nodded, studying my granddaughter's face. So young, so certain that every problem has a clear solution. "I'm not ready yet. Because you're punishing them," she deduced, "making them suffer for what they did. Is that what your father told you?" Emily shook her head. "He gave me some nonsense about you being confused and suddenly attached to this place. I know better." She took my hands in hers. "What they did was horrible, unforgivable even. But this isn't the answer, Grandma. You can't live in a nursing home to spite them." "I'm not staying to spite them," I said carefully. "I'm staying because I need time to decide what I want, not what your father wants, or your aunt, or your uncle, or even you. For the first time in decades, I have the freedom to choose my own path." Emily's expression softened as she processed my words. At 22, she was still young enough to believe in absolute solutions, but mature enough to recognize the complexity of human emotions. "So what do you want?" she asked finally. "Surely not to live in this place forever." "No, not forever," I agreed, gazing around the small room that had begun to accumulate personal touches. The bookshelves now installed and partially filled, photos arranged on the dresser, the colorful throw from home brightening the institutional bedspread. But for now, it serves a purpose, which is time, space to think, distance from people who see me as either a burden or a lottery ticket. Emily winced at the harshness of my assessment, but didn't argue. Instead, she reached for her bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "Speaking of lottery tickets, this came to the house, from your publisher." I opened the envelope to find royalty statements, press clippings, and most significantly, a check for the first installment of my prize money. The figure, $3 million, the first of 3 annual payments, seemed almost abstract, the zeros marching across the paper in neat formation. "That's a lot of money, Grandma," Emily said quietly. "Yes," I agreed. "Life-changing money. What will you do with it?" I slipped the check back into its envelope. "Some will go to the Literacy Foundation I mentioned in the interview. Some will be invested for the future, and some—" I hesitated, then decided on honesty. "Some will go to you." Her eyes widened. "Me? But I didn't do anything." "You believed in me," I said simply. "When I needed it most." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I just read your pages and told you they were good. Because they were good. You were the only one who bothered to ask what I was working on in those early morning hours. The only one who noticed I had a life beyond being your grandmother." She brushed away a tear, embarrassed by the emotion. "Mom and Dad should have noticed too." "Perhaps," I acknowledged. "But people often see what they expect to see. They expected an aging widow filling her time with harmless scribbling. They couldn't envision a woman reinventing herself at 78. Our conversation was interrupted by a gentle knock. Daniel stood in the doorway, looking apologetic. "I'm sorry to intrude," he said. "I didn't realize you had company." "Not at all," I said, waving him in. "Daniel, this is my granddaughter, Emily. Emily, this is Daniel Morris, former senior editor at Harper & Row and my first friend here at Sunrise Valley." Emily's literary background immediately engaged with this information. "Harper & Row? Did you work with Barbara Kingsolver? Louise Erdrich?" Daniel's face lit up with delight at her knowledge. "Indeed I did. Brilliant women, both of them. Your grandmother's work reminds me of them. That same clear-eyed perspective on history, the attention to how large events affect individual lives. As they launched into an animated discussion about publishing, I observed my granddaughter, her intelligence, her enthusiasm, her genuine interest in others. Unlike her father, aunt, and uncle, Emily had inherited not just my features, but my curiosity about the world beyond herself. Watching her interact with Daniel, I felt a swell of pride, untainted by the disappointment that colored my feelings toward her father and his siblings. Eventually, our conversation turned to practical matters. Emily had brought clothes and personal items from my house, along with a disturbing revelation. "Dad's been meeting with real estate agents," she confided, when Daniel excused himself to give us privacy. I overheard him on the phone discussing market value and potential upgrades to maximize sale price. Though I'd suspected as much, the confirmation still stung. "The house isn't his to sell," I reminded her. "It's in my name." "He seems to think you'll sign it over," Emily said hesitantly. "He told the agent you're amenable to downsizing given your health situation." A cold anger settled in my chest, not the hot flash of indignation that had sustained me through the initial betrayal, but something deeper and more resolved. Robert had always been presumptuous, but this level of entitlement, planning to sell my home while I sat in a nursing home, crossed a line I hadn't known existed until now. "I need to speak with a lawyer," I said, thinking aloud, "and a financial advisor, someone independent with no connection to your father." Emily nodded. "I can help with that. One of my professors practiced elder law before teaching. She might have recommendations." The next week was a flurry of discreet meetings in the private dining room at Sunrise Valley, which the administrator was only too happy to make available for the distinguished Mrs. Wilson. My newly acquired status as a wealthy, award-winning author opened doors that would have remained firmly closed to an ordinary resident. George Patel, the financial advisor recommended by Emily's professor, reviewed my assets with professional thoroughness. The house, worth considerably more than I'd realized in the current market, Edward's life insurance and our modest investments, my pension, and now the prize money and anticipated royalties. "You're in an enviable financial position, Mrs. Wilson," he concluded, organizing his papers meticulously, "particularly with the prize money. The question is, what do you want to do with it?" "Secure my independence," I said without hesitation, "and ensure that no one can make decisions for me again without my consent." George nodded approvingly. "A trust might be appropriate. We can structure it to support your needs while protecting your assets from undue influence." Meredith Jacobson, the elder law attorney who joined our second meeting, was a formidable woman in her 60s with a no-nonsense demeanor and a clear passion for protecting her clients. "What your children did was reprehensible," she stated bluntly after hearing my story, "but unfortunately, not uncommon. Adult children often make unilateral decisions about their parents' care, particularly when financial interests align with those decisions. They had no legal right to place me here," I confirmed, seeking clarity. "None whatsoever," Meredith agreed. "You're fully competent, you have no guardian or conservator, and the mild stroke in your medical history doesn't remotely justify institutional care without your consent." The validation was surprisingly emotional. For a moment, I couldn't speak past the tightness in my throat. "The question now," Meredith continued gently, "is what you want going forward. Do you want to return to your home, find a new living situation, or perhaps stay here temporarily while you consider options?" In the soft glow of early February sunlight, I sat on a bench in Sunrise Valley's small garden, watching a cardinal flit between snow-dusted branches. Daniel occupied the space beside me, our shoulders nearly touching, a comfortable silence between us as we contemplated the winter landscape. 6 weeks had passed since my children had abandoned me here. 6 transformative weeks of legal consultations, financial planning, and deep personal reflection. Meredith had helped me establish a comprehensive living trust, healthcare directive, and power of attorney that named Emily, not her father or aunt or uncle, as my representative should I become truly incapacitated. George had structured my newfound wealth to support both my needs and the literacy foundation I was establishing. The preliminary paperwork for the Margaret Wilson Foundation for Literary Arts was now proceeding through the necessary legal channels. "Penny for your thoughts," Daniel said, breaking our companionable silence. I smiled. "I believe they're worth considerably more these days." "Touché," he chuckled. "Let me rephrase. Would you care to share what's occupying that prize-winning mind of yours this morning?" I considered his question, watching my breath form small clouds in the crisp air. "I'm thinking about choices, the ones made for us, the ones we make for ourselves, and how difficult it can be to distinguish between them sometimes." "Profound territory for a Thursday morning," he observed. "Any particular choices weighing on you?" "I've made a decision about the house," I said, turning to face him directly. I'm selling it. His eyebrows rose slightly. That seems significant. May I ask why? It was never truly my home, I explained, the realization having crystallized during a recent therapy session. Another new development in my life, courtesy of Sunrise Valley's surprisingly competent mental health services. It was where Edward and I raised our family, but after he died, it became more mausoleum than sanctuary. I stayed because leaving seemed disloyal to his memory, not because the space brought me joy. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. And now? Where will you go? I found a lovely condominium in that new development near the university. 2 bedrooms, main floor, with a small garden terrace and excellent security. Close enough to town for convenience, but private enough for writing. It sounds perfect, he said, though I detected a note of something, disappointment perhaps, in his voice. It's also only 10 minutes from here, I added, watching his expression carefully. For visiting purposes. His face brightened. Visiting purposes indeed. I would like that very much, Maggie. A comfortable silence settled between us again, broken only by the Cardinal's occasional call. In the weeks since Christmas, our friendship had deepened into something neither of us had explicitly defined, but both clearly valued. At our age, romantic declarations seemed somehow both redundant and premature. We were beyond youthful impulsivity, but also acutely aware of time's limited nature. My children are coming today, I said after a while. All of them, plus Emily. I've asked them to meet me in the conference room at noon. Daniel reached for my gloved hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. The moment of truth, then. How are you feeling about it? Resolved, I said after consideration. Not angry anymore, not even particularly hurt, just clear about where we stand and how we'll proceed from here. Would you like moral support? I could lurk menacingly in the hallway, glaring at them whenever they emerge. The mental image of dignified literary Daniel lurking menacingly made me laugh. Thank you, but this is something I need to do alone, though perhaps we could have dinner afterward. I suspect I'll be emotionally exhausted regardless of how it goes. It's a date, he confirmed, and neither of us pretended the word choice was casual. At precisely noon, I entered the small conference room where my children waited. The administrator had arranged the space at my request, another courtesy extended to the suddenly valuable resident I had become. Robert, Susan, and David sat on one side of the table, with Emily opposite them, a physical manifestation of the emotional divide that had developed since Christmas. Thank you for coming, I began, taking the seat at the head of the table. I appreciate you all making the time. Of course, Mom, Robert replied, with the ingratiating smile he typically reserved for important clients. You said it was important. It is. I placed a folder on the table before me. I've made some decisions about my future that affect all of you, and I wanted to communicate them clearly, face to face. Susan leaned forward, medical concern creasing her brow. Is everything all right? Health-wise? My health is excellent, thank you. The same as it was on Christmas Eve when you insisted I needed institutional care. The pointed reminder caused Susan to sit back, chastened. David studied his hands, while Robert maintained his professional facade. I've decided to sell the house, I continued, noting with grim satisfaction how Robert's expression flickered with calculation. I've engaged a realtor of my own choosing, and the proceeds will go directly into my trust. Your trust? Robert couldn't hide his surprise. What trust? The Margaret Wilson Living Trust, established last month. Emily has agreed to serve as successor trustee should I become incapacitated. The bombshell landed with satisfying impact. Robert's face flushed, Susan's mouth tightened, and David looked up with undisguised shock. That's unexpected, Robert managed finally. Don't you think one of us would be more appropriate, given our professional experience? After careful consideration, no, I said calmly. Your professional experience didn't prevent you from making catastrophically poor decisions regarding my care. In fact, it seems to have facilitated them. Mother, that's unfair, Susan protested. We were concerned about your well-being. Were you? I met her gaze directly. Or were you concerned about the inconvenience I might become if my health deteriorated? The potential burden on your time and resources? David, always the most sensitive to undercurrents, recognized the futility of denial. We handled it badly, he admitted. All of us. We should have discussed options with you, not ambushed you on Christmas Eve. Yes, you should have, I agreed. But you didn't. And while I appreciate the acknowledgement, it doesn't change what happened or my need to protect myself going forward. Protect yourself? Robert repeated incredulously. From your own children? From anyone who views me as either a burden to be managed or an asset to be leveraged. I opened the folder and distributed copies of a single-page document. These are the key provisions of my trust and my expectations moving forward. I suggest you review them carefully. The document before my children was deliberately concise, a distillation of the comprehensive legal framework Meredith had helped me establish. It outlined the creation of my trust, Emily's role as successor trustee, and my explicit directives regarding future care decisions. The final paragraph detailed my intentions for the prize money. 1/3 to the Literacy Foundation, 1/3 to secure my independence through carefully managed investments, and 1/3 divided into separate trusts for each of my children and Emily. You're still including us in your estate plan? Susan asked, genuine surprise in her voice as she processed the information. You're my children, I replied simply. That hasn't changed, despite recent events. Robert scanned the document with practiced efficiency, his mind clearly calculating figures. These individual trusts, they have conditions attached? They do. I nodded, unsurprised by his focus on the financial aspects. You'll each receive quarterly income from your respective trusts, but the principal remains intact until my death, at which point it transfers to you directly. And Emily gets the same amount as each of us? Robert couldn't quite keep the edge from his voice. Despite being a generation removed, Emily stiffened beside me, but I placed a gentle hand on her arm. Emily gets the same amount because she's demonstrated the character and judgment I hope to encourage in all of you. This isn't about genetic proximity, Robert. It's about recognizing and rewarding the values I hold dear, which apparently don't include family loyalty, Susan muttered. On the contrary, I countered, my voice steady. Family loyalty is paramount, but it must flow in both directions. Loyalty isn't abandoning your mother at a nursing home on Christmas Eve because her care has become inconvenient. It isn't plotting to sell her home without her knowledge or consent. David's head snapped up, his gaze darting to Robert. You were planning to sell the house? Without telling Mom? Robert's expression hardened. I was exploring options, that's all. Given Mom's situation, downsizing made financial sense. My situation being that you thought I was broke and declining, I clarified. How quickly that assessment changed when $10 million entered the equation. An uncomfortable silence descended over the table. Emily, who had remained remarkably restrained throughout, finally spoke. I think what Grandma is trying to say is that trust, once broken, takes time and effort to rebuild. This plan gives everyone an opportunity to do that, to establish a new relationship based on mutual respect, not financial dependency or obligation. I smiled at my granddaughter, proud of her insight and maturity. Exactly. I'm not punishing you, I addressed my children. I'm creating boundaries that should have existed long ago. Where will you live if you're selling the house? David asked, the first practical question that didn't revolve around money. I've purchased a condominium near campus, I informed them. It will be ready next month. Until then, I've decided to stay here at Sunrise Valley. By choice? Susan seemed unable to comprehend this decision. But you don't need this level of care. You said so yourself. I'm not staying for the care, I explained. I'm staying because I've found a community here. People who value me for my mind and spirit, not for what I can provide or what I might cost them. I didn't mention Daniel specifically, though Emily's knowing smile suggested she had observed more than I'd realized during her frequent visits. I'd like to ask something of each of you, I continued, shifting to the final phase of the conversation I'd rehearsed with my therapist. A way forward, if you're willing. They waited, varying degrees of wariness on their faces. Robert, I'd like you to serve on the board of the Margaret Wilson Foundation. Your business acumen would be valuable, and it might help you understand what I value beyond monetary worth. His expression registered surprise, followed by cautious interest. I'd be honored to consider it. Susan, I'd like you to connect the foundation with your hospital's community outreach program. The literacy initiatives for seniors could benefit from medical partnership, particularly for those with cognitive challenges. She nodded slowly, professional engagement visibly overriding personal grievance. And David, I hope you'll contribute your academic perspective to our educational programs. Your experience with university outreach would be invaluable for the scholarship components. Of course, he agreed readily, always the most amenable to reconciliation. This isn't forgiveness, I clarified, meeting each of their eyes in turn. Not yet, but it is an opportunity for all of us to build something worthwhile together, to find a new way of relating as adults with separate but interconnected lives. After they departed, subdued but not hostile progress of a sort, Emily lingered, her expression troubled. Are you sure about staying here, Grandma? Even temporarily? After what they did? I considered her question carefully. Sunrise Valley wasn't my choice initially, but it has become one. The irony isn't lost on me that in trying to discard me, your father and his siblings actually gave me an unexpected gift, freedom from the obligations and patterns that had defined me for decades. Plus there's Daniel, Emily added, with the directness of youth. I felt a warmth rise in my cheeks that had nothing to do with the overheated conference room. Yes, there's Daniel. He makes you happy. It wasn't a question. He does, I confirmed. In a way I hadn't expected to experience again at my age. Emily smiled, the tension leaving her shoulders. Then I'm glad, even if the circumstances that brought you together were awful. Life rarely delivers its gifts in expected packaging, I observed. Sometimes the most valuable presents arrive looking like disasters. Later that evening, as Daniel and I shared dinner in the private dining room, a courtesy extended by the increasingly solicitous administrator, I recounted the meeting with my children. Not quite the dramatic confrontation one might expect, Daniel remarked, his eyes twinkling. No disinheritance, no melodramatic pronouncements, rather civilized, all things considered. Disappointingly so, perhaps. From a narrative standpoint, I agreed with a smile. But real life rarely provides the neat resolution fiction demands. Speaking of resolutions, Daniel set down his fork, suddenly serious. I've been considering my living situation as well. My heart quickened inexplicably. Oh? I've realized that while Sunrise Valley has its charms, chief among them the company, it's not where I want to spend my remaining years. He reached across the table, covering my hand with his. I've been looking at condominiums in that development near the university, specifically one that recently sold to a distinguished author of my acquaintance. The unit next door, I whispered, hardly daring to believe what he was suggesting. He nodded, a question in his eyes. Too presumptuous? Not at all, I assured him, turning my hand to clasp his. It seems that abandonment has led to the most unexpected discovery. What's that? That even at 78, life can offer new beginnings. That sometimes the worst day of your life, being discarded by your family on Christmas Eve, can set in motion the best chapter you never dared imagine. Daniel raised his water glass in a toast to unexpected gifts and the courage to recognize them. To unexpected gifts, I echoed, certain now that my children's betrayal, painful as it had been, had freed me to accept the most precious gift of all, the chance to write my own ending. The Christmas tree in my condominium stood in the corner of the living room, its lights reflecting in the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the university campus. Unlike the modest pine I had decorated in solitude last year, this tree sparkled with an eclectic collection of ornaments, some from my past, others newly acquired, each representing a piece of the remarkable year that had unfolded since my children had left me at Sunrise Valley. More eggnog, Maggie? Daniel asked, appearing from the kitchen with 2 steaming mugs. In the 11 months since we had moved into adjoining condominiums, with a connecting door discreetly installed between our living rooms, he had become as essential to my daily existence as breathing. Not quite husband, we had both decided that formal marriage at our age seemed unnecessary, but far more than companion, partner, in every sense that mattered. Thank you. I accepted the mug gratefully, inhaling the nutmeg-scented steam. Emily just texted. Their flight landed, and they should be here in about an hour. Plenty of time to finish setting up, Daniel observed, glancing around at the transformation our space had undergone in preparation for Christmas Eve dinner. My dining table, expanded with both leaves, dominated the living area, set for 9 with my best china and crystal, salvaged from the house before its sale, now imbued with new purpose. The past year had been one of profound reinvention. The Margaret Wilson Foundation for Literary Arts had launched officially in March, already funding literacy programs for seniors in 3 states and sponsoring a scholarship for older writers pursuing their first publication. I had completed my second novel, a contemporary story about reinvention in later life, and my publisher had enthusiastically accepted it for publication next fall. Daniel had emerged from retirement to serve as the Foundation's literary advisor, bringing decades of editorial wisdom and industry connections that proved invaluable. My relationships with my children had evolved into something I hadn't anticipated, not the unquestioning closeness I had once craved, but a measured respect based on clearer boundaries and shared purpose. Robert had indeed joined the Foundation's board, bringing unexpected dedication to our mission once he realized I was serious about his involvement extending beyond financial oversight. Susan had connected us with her hospital's geriatric program, resulting in an innovative initiative combining cognitive health and creative expression for seniors with early dementia. David had helped establish university partnerships that extended our reach beyond what I had initially envisioned. None of these relationships had returned to their previous state. That wasn't possible after the breach of trust. But something new and arguably healthier had emerged from the ruins of last Christmas. We spoke more honestly now, disagreed more openly, and paradoxically, understood each other better than we had when maintaining the polite fictions that had governed our interactions for decades. The doorbell rang at precisely 5 o'clock. Emily stood on the threshold, her boyfriend Michael beside her, both carrying brightly wrapped packages. "Merry Christmas, Grandma," she exclaimed, embracing me warmly before turning to Daniel with equal affection. "The place looks amazing." "All Daniel's doing," I admitted as we moved inside. "He has hidden talents as an interior decorator. Merely an eye for beauty," Daniel demurred with a wink in my direction. "Comes from decades of manuscript assessment." Emily and Michael arranged their gifts beneath the tree, joining the careful display already assembled. This year, unlike last, there would be thoughtful exchanges, not the hastily purchased gift shop items my children had offered in embarrassment, but selections chosen with genuine consideration. The simple act of gift-giving had been reclaimed from obligation and transformed into something meaningful again. My phone chimed with a text from Susan, running 15 minutes late. Thomas had a last-minute patient. Sorry. Thomas, Susan's husband and a pediatric surgeon, had been the most genuinely apologetic of the extended family after last year's debacle, having been unaware of the plan to move me to Sunrise Valley until it was already executed. His relationship with Susan had apparently undergone its own reckoning in the aftermath, resulting in better communication and a more equal partnership, according to Emily's reports. "Mom says they're running late," I informed the others, "which gives us time for something special before everyone arrives." I nodded to Daniel, who retrieved 3 gift bags from his condominium through our connecting door. "What's this?" Emily asked, as I handed her one of the bags. "I thought we were doing gifts after dinner." "These are preliminary gifts," I explained. "Something I wanted to share with just the 2 of you first." Emily and Michael exchanged curious glances before carefully extracting the tissue paper from their bags. Inside each was a handsomely bound book with a simple cover, Echoes of Silence, Special Edition. "It's being released next month," I explained. "A special hardcover edition with a new afterword. The publisher sent me advance copies." I paused, suddenly emotional. "I wanted you to have the first ones, signed." Emily opened her copy to find my inscription. "To Emily, who believed first and without reservation. Your faith made everything possible. With infinite love, Grandma." Tears welled in her eyes as she read the words. "I didn't do anything special," she protested softly. "I just read your pages. You saw me," I corrected her, "when no one else bothered to look. That made all the difference." The doorbell rang again, heralding the arrival of David and his wife Laura. They entered with the slightly tentative air that still characterized our interactions, a carefulness born of regret and the ongoing work of rebuilding trust. "Merry Christmas, Mom," David offered, embracing me with genuine warmth. "The new place looks wonderful. Thank you for having us," Laura added, her sincerity evident. Of all my children's spouses, she had been the most mortified by last year's events, having been told only after the fact what had transpired. Robert and his wife Cynthia arrived next, followed shortly by Susan and Thomas. As everyone settled in the living room with glasses of wine or eggnog, I observed the gathering with a sense of surreality. 1 year ago tonight, these same people, minus Daniel, had orchestrated my removal to Sunrise Valley with clinical efficiency. Now they sat in my new home, engaging in polite conversation, complimenting the decor, behaving for all the world like a normal family celebrating Christmas Eve. But we weren't the same family. Not really. The fundamental dynamics had shifted, power had redistributed, and most importantly, I was no longer the accommodating matriarch, grateful for whatever attention my busy children deigned to provide. I was Margaret Wilson, award-winning author, philanthropist, woman of independent means and clear boundaries. The difference was palpable in every interaction. The way Robert sought my approval, the absence of Susan's medical assessments, David's more genuine engagement. When we gathered around the dining table for the holiday meal, a catered affair this year, my concession to practical limitations, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinarily different emotions I felt compared to last Christmas Eve. Then, I had been filled with anticipation and nervous excitement about revealing my literary success. Now, I felt a calm certainty about my place in the world and in this reconfigured family structure. "Before we eat," I said, raising my glass, "I'd like to propose a toast." All eyes turned to me expectantly. "To unexpected journeys," I began, meeting Daniel's gaze briefly before continuing. 1 year ago tonight, life took a turn none of us could have anticipated. The path has been difficult at times, illuminating at others, but I find myself, at 79, more fully alive than I've been in decades. I paused, looking at each face around the table. My children with their complex mix of guilt and reconciliation, their spouses with varying degrees of discomfort and acceptance, Emily with her unabashed pride, Daniel with his steady love, and Michael witnessing our family's evolution with the perspective of a newcomer. I've learned that sometimes what feels like an ending is merely a painful but necessary transition to a new chapter, that sometimes people must disappoint us profoundly before authentic relationships can emerge, and that it's never too late to rewrite your own story. Silence held for a moment as my words settled over the gathering. Then Emily raised her glass. "To Grandma, and second chapters." "To second chapters," everyone echoed, the phrase carrying different significance for each person at the table. As we enjoyed our meal, conversation flowed more naturally than I had dared hope. Robert shared updates about the Foundation's expanding initiatives, his genuine enthusiasm suggesting that his involvement had become more than a penance. Susan described a new research project combining creative writing therapy with traditional treatment for depression in elderly patients. David discussed the university's interest in documenting the Foundation's work as a model for similar programs nationwide. After dinner, as we gathered around the tree for the gift exchange, I found myself standing slightly apart, watching this tableau of family connection with the perspective of both participant and observer. Daniel joined me, his hand finding mine with the easy familiarity we had developed. "Penny for your thoughts, Maggie," he murmured. "I was just thinking about last Christmas," I admitted quietly. "How sometimes the worst moments can lead to the most unexpected blessings, like being abandoned at Sunrise Valley only to find a captive audience for your literary opinions," he suggested with the dry humor I had come to cherish. "Like being forced to stand on my own just long enough to realize I didn't need the supports I'd been clinging to," I corrected gently. "Like discovering that family can be redefined at any age. Like meeting you." His fingers tightened around mine. "Best Christmas gift I ever received," he said simply. "Finding you amid all that institutional beige." Emily approached, interrupting our moment with an apologetic smile. "Sorry to intrude, but there's a package for you, Grandma. It just arrived by courier." She handed me a small, elegantly wrapped box with no card or identification beyond my name and address. Curious, I unwrapped it carefully to find a velvet jewelry box. Inside, nestled against dark satin, was a delicate silver pen engraved with a simple message. "To M.W. Your story continues. Keep writing." "Who's it from?" Emily asked, peering at the pen. I examined the box again, finding a tiny card I had initially overlooked. The message, written in a flowing hand I recognized immediately, read simply, "From one writer to another. With admiration, J.R." "Julia Reed," I breathed, understanding dawning. My publisher had mentioned that the renowned author had selected Echoes of Silence for her prestigious book club, but I had no idea she had taken a personal interest. The Julia Reed? Daniel asked, impressed. She never sends personal gifts to other authors. She's famously reclusive. Apparently, she's made an exception, I said, touched beyond words by this gesture of professional recognition from an author I had long admired. As I carefully returned the pen to its box, I was struck by the perfect symmetry of the moment. 1 year ago, I had sat alone in a sterile room at Sunrise Valley, abandoned by family, my carefully prepared Christmas dinner uneaten, my planned revelation of literary success thwarted. Tonight, I stood in a home of my choosing, surrounded by family relationships in various stages of repair, my success not just revealed but celebrated, with a token of professional recognition from a literary idol in my hands. The path between those 2 Christmas Eves had been neither straight nor easy, but as I rejoined the gathering, Daniel's steady presence beside me, I felt profound gratitude for the journey. My children had given me what they'd claimed was for my own good that night, institutional care I didn't need or want. But life, with its infinite capacity for irony and redemption, had transformed their abandonment into the unexpected gift of genuine independence, creative fulfillment, and even late-life love. As Emily called everyone to attention for a group photo in front of the tree, I took my place in the center, Daniel beside me, my family arranged around us in their new configuration. Not perfect, not without its fault lines and fragilities, but real in a way it had never been before. "Everyone say Merry Christmas," Emily directed, raising her camera. "Merry Christmas," we chorused, and as the flash captured the moment, I thought, yes, it truly is.
You know, before I end this video, I want to talk to you for a moment. Not as a narrator, not as someone telling a story, but just as someone sitting across from you, reflecting on what we just experienced together. Because stories like this, they don't just come and go, they stay. They linger in your mind, in your chest, in that quiet space where you start asking yourself questions you didn't expect. I remember the first time I came across a story like this. It wasn't dramatic in the way movies are. There were no grand speeches, no perfect endings, just the woman facing things that felt impossibly heavy, and yet somehow she kept going. Not because she had all the answers, not because she wasn't afraid, but because something inside her refused to give up. And I think that's what makes stories like the one you just watched so powerful. It's not about perfection. It's not about always winning. It's about endurance. It's about what happens when the world tries to defy you, limit you, silence you, and you still choose to stand. Even if your voice shakes, even if your steps are slow. The women in these stories, they're not just characters. They represent something real, something that has existed for generations, strength that has been passed down, even though pain, courage that show off, even when it feels like there's nothing left. And if you really think about it, how many times has that kind of strength gone unnoticed? How many stories were never told? How many voices were never heard? That's why this channel exists, to create a space where those stories are not just told but felt, where every moment of struggle matters, where every act of courage, no matter how small, is seen, and where rising again and again becomes something worth honoring. Maybe there was a moment in this story that hit you a little differently. Maybe it reminded you of someone you know. Maybe it reminded you of yourself. And if it did, I hope you hold on to that. Because strength doesn't always look like what we expect. Sometimes it looks like surviving one more day. Sometimes it looks like walking away. Sometimes it looks like starting over when everything in you is tired. But it's still strength and it still matters. So as you leave this video, don't just move on to the next thing right away. Sit with this for a second. Think about the journeys you just witnessed. Think about what it represents. And most importantly, remember that every story like this is the reminder of something powerful. That no matter how many times someone is pushed down, no matter how many systems try to break them, there is always the possibility of rising again. If this story meant something to you, I'd love for you to stay with us on this journey because there are so many more stories waiting. Stories that will challenge you, move you, and maybe even change the way you see the world just a little bit. Thank you for being here with me, truly. And until the next story, take care of yourself, keep your heart open, and never forget how powerful it is to rise, even when it's hard. Bye.